Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. West African leaders are discussing how to respond to a coup in conflict-hit Burkina Faso earlier this week, the latest in a wave of military power grabs in the region that has prompted fears of further instability. The 15-member Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, regional bloc, had suspended and imposed sanctions on Burkina Faso's neighbors, Mali and Guinea, following coups in August 2020 and September 2021. The extraordinary virtual meeting on Friday comes hours after Burkina Faso's new military ruler called for international support in his first address to the nation since he led the overthrow of democratically elected President Roch Kabore on Monday. Burkina Faso is the third Western country to witness a military takeover in the past year. Burkina Faso's new military leader, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba, has appeared on television for the first time, promising a return to constitutional order when conditions are right. Now, this is a military man who just got promoted to commander of the country's third military region, which is responsible for security in the capital, Ouagadougou. Before then, he had relatively little public profile. We'll hear more on who he is.
Burkina Faso's new military leader has spoken on television for the first time, promising a return to constitutional order when conditions are right. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba has emerged as leader of a junta that ousted President Roch Kabore, accusing him of failing to tackle rising militant violence.
When the conditions are right, according to the deadline that our people will define in all sovereignty, I commit to a return to a normal constitutional order. Fellow citizens, people of Burkina Faso in the diaspora, while there are many priorities, it is clear that the main priority remains security. We must significantly reduce the areas under terrorist influence and impact of violent extremism.
Damiba first appeared on Burkinabe TV screens on Monday, January the 24th. He sat next to a captain reading the statement announcing that Kabore had been deposed. Before then, he had relatively little public profile. On Thursday, he called on the international community to support the country so it could emerge quickly and resume its march towards development.
I understand the legitimate doubts raised by this break in the normal functioning of the state, but I would like to reassure all friends of Burkina Faso that the country will continue to respect its international commitments, particularly with regard to the respect of human rights.
Damiba was promoted in December to commander of Burkina Faso's third military region, which is responsible for security in the capital, Ouagadougou. That promotion came amid protests over surging violence and was part of a shake-up some analysts viewed as an effort by Kabore to shore up support in the military.
The French embassy in Kenya has warned of an impending terrorist attack targeting Western nationals living in Kenya. In an alert on Thursday, the French embassy cautioned its citizens to be extra vigilant, saying there is a persistence of serious threats and a risk of public places frequented by foreign nationals being targeted. It cited restaurants and hotels, leisure venues and shopping centers, especially in the capital Nairobi, as being vulnerable and advised people to avoid visiting them, including over this coming weekend. The Netherlands and German embassies have also asked their citizens to be alert. However, reacting to the warning, Kenya's police service is giving an assurance that security has been scaled up and is urging the public to report any suspicious activity. Joining us now is security analyst David Otto for more on this. Hello, David. Thank you for speaking to us. How serious is this warning of an impending terror attack in Kenya? It's quite worrying.
Yes, of course, it's very worrying. Of course, it comes from one would have expected that this kind of threat comes from Kenya itself, not France, which is of course a foreign state. But there are a number of indicative factors, which one must, take into consideration to really take this very seriously. First of all, Kenya has been a country that has been attacked several times by groups that are linked to Al-Shabaab. So there is that existing threat, which means there are sleeper cells within Kenya that could reactivate and launch attacks, as deadly as we've seen in previous attacks. Secondly, there is this group within the Mozambican terror network that has very strong links with the Swahili-speaking natives. Some of them have been known to come from Kenya. So because there is this ongoing insurgency being launched by SANIM, which is the South African forces, and Rwanda, it's possible that some of these groups have now been running back towards Kenyan borders, and that could indicate an existential risk. The recent attack that we saw in Uganda by the Allied Democratic Forces also is a serious concern. These are some of the elements which I think, will make this quite a serious threat, even though it comes from France and not Kenya itself.
Yeah, but now, the Kenyan Police Service is giving assurance that security has been scaled up. Do you think this is enough to, stem this lurking danger?
That's the job of the police, to reassure the population that it is safe. But there's one thing to say these things, that there's another thing to actually, keep the country safe. I think what is important here is for the police to ensure that they can buy the hearts and minds of the population. They can, create a lot more awareness, to ensure that people are vigilant, that, people are in this together with the government, because obviously terrorists would always, select locations where there are people, and, the more vigilant that people are, the better equipped they will be. I mean, I've seen police, counter-terrorism police being deployed to the streets. This is not a conventional warfare where you can see clearly where the enemy is coming from. But I think it's much more a people-centric approach. And the government would do better if it then creates a much more wider awareness to ensure that, the people can work together with the police and provide that timely intelligence that they require, to prevent any attacks from happening.
All right, then, security analyst David Otto, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
The United Nations World Food Programme is warning of extreme hunger in northern Ethiopia. For more than a year now, when government forces have been fighting rebels, aid agencies have been facing severe challenges in delivering supplies to Ethiopia's Tigray region. No UN food convoy has been able to reach Tigray since mid-December, but the WFP says 100 trucks a day are needed to prevent starvation. In its latest security assessment, it found more than 80% of families are food insecure. Less than a third are getting the daily calories they need. And in the Afar region, 28% of children under 5 are malnourished, well above the UN's emergency threshold of 15%. Well, in the meantime, UN spokesperson Stephen Dujarric says more people are fleeing their homes due to continued fighting around the town of Abala in Afar province, that's near the boundary with Tigray province.
More people are fleeing their homes due to continued fighting around the town of Abala in Afar province, near the boundary with Tigray province. The clashes are also preventing the delivery of assistance by the only available route into Tigray, with no supplies having arrived there since mid-December. In Tigray, we, along with our humanitarian partners, have been forced to scale back even more our operations due to the severe shortages of supply, the severe shortage of fuel and cash. Aid organizations have warned that operations could cease completely by the end of February. Nutrition supplies for supplementary feeding and treatment of severe acute malnutrition have already run out. Aid continues to be scaled up in areas of Amhara and Afar, which are accessible. More than 523,000 people received food in Amhara in the past week, with some 3.2 million men, women, and children have been reached with food assistance since last October. In Afar province, nearly 380,000 people have been reached this current round of food distribution.
Morocco says it will reopen its airspace to international passenger flights next month. The North African country banned all incoming and outgoing international flights last November to try and limit the spread of the Omicron variant of coronavirus. Moroccan Prime Minister Aziz Hanouch said that the ban would be lifted on February 7th and is urging passengers to comply with COVID-19 guidelines. He's also calling on Moroccans to take their vaccine jabs. Morocco has had just more than 15,000 COVID fatalities so far. Rwanda has announced that its main border with Uganda that was closed back in 2019 will be reopened on Monday. Cross-border movement of people and goods at the Gatuna-Katuna border was halted following tensions between the two East African nations. Produce had only been allowed to pass through two smaller border posts at Sinyika and Katitumba. The reopening was announced after Lieutenant General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, the son of Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, went to meet Rwandan President Paul Kagame over the weekend. On Tuesday, Uganda sacked the head of military intelligence, Major General Abdel Kandiho, who Rwanda had accused of working with its dissidents. Well, the reopening of the main border and the sacking of the official marks a significant thawing in relations between the two countries. Indirect elections are ongoing in various constituencies in Somalia. The Electoral Commission says 73 out of 275 MP seats have so far been filled. The elections started in November and were supposed to be done by the 24th of December, but the process had been delayed because of disputes. Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble and regional state leaders reached a deal on the 9th of this month to be able to complete the polls by February. The complex poll process involves clan elders selecting delegates who then elect the members of parliament. Members of the Senate, the upper house, are elected by regional state assemblies. Now, there will now be a joint sitting of the two houses, which will then elect a president. However, the date for the presidential elections has not been set. We continue with one of our headline stories. Rwanda, reopening the border with Uganda after 3 years. Joining us now is Kanari Mugume, Ugandan journalist, for more on this. Hello, Canary. Thank you for speaking to us. We understand you were at the border earlier. Talk to us about the mood at the crossing. I mean, it's the reopening after 3 years.
Well, it's a very eventful day. It's going to be a very eventful day on Monday because this is the first time the border is reopening for the first time in 3 years. So everyone is looking forward to that from Rwanda side and Ugandan side. So I've been at the border and I'm currently staying in the town where the border is called Katuna. And I've spoken to the community and they are really, really optimistic that with this, Uganda-Rwanda relations will improve for the better.
Yeah, so how will things change come Monday? I mean, what changes do we expect to see when the borders open?
All right, so what has happened is that there's not been any business at all. Business, I mean, trucks ferrying merchandise and people doing cross-border trade. So that has not been happening for 3 years because Rwanda restricted her citizens from joining, rather crossing the border and coming into Uganda. But also remember that these are border communities that are very deeply interconnected and therefore they have families on either ends. Rwandans have families in Uganda, and Ugandans have families in Rwanda. And therefore, reopening the border really means that all this comes to an end. It means that Rwanda can finally do business with Uganda officially. Uganda can officially do business with Rwanda. But also communities that have not seen each other for 3 years that's a very long time, can now finally see each other. So it's something that everyone is looking forward to.
All right, then on Monday, we'll have to wait and see how it all pans out. But thank you so much, Mugume Kanari. Thank you for joining us.
It is, man. Thanks for having me.
Kenyan police and wildlife authorities have seized 14 pieces of ivory from 2 suspected poachers riding a motorcycle. In a statement, the police said 2 suspects were arrested on Thursday at a road junction in Busia in western Kenya. The 60-year-old man and his 70-year-old suspected accomplice are being held in custody at a police station awaiting charges. Illegal hunting of elephants for their tusks and habitat loss pose a serious threat to the species. African elephants are listed as endangered species by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, with their population having shrunk dramatically in the last 3 decades. However, a crackdown on poaching in Kenya has seen a rise in their numbers since 2014. That's according to the Kenya Wildlife Service. Welcome to our Africa Tech segment. Since the end of October last year, the metaverse has fast become one of the most talked about and researched technology. While some say it is the next frontier in the evolution of the internet as a space where the real and virtual worlds collide, others are of the opinion that the metaverse is being dominated by companies who want to make more money. However, many would agree that there is a revolution going on and it is being pushed forward by big tech and social media companies. But how can Africa position itself as a leading player in the metaverse? Well, we have joining us to discuss this is Emeka Obia, the lead strategy and planning, Leo Burnett, Lagos. Thank you for joining us, Emeka.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's begin with what this new trend is with the metaverse. What's your take on it?
I'd say this is like, back in the 1970s when people talk about the internet and a lot of people didn't get what it was, but eventually we got to a time where, the world couldn't do without it. I think it's just that convergence that we're beginning to see between the physical, the virtual, and the augmented world that allows people to interact in this new world in a way that sort of breaks down physical and economic barriers. That's what essentially it is. And whilst it's still at a nascent stage, it presents a whole new opportunity for the world, whole new possibilities to be able to exist in a different world as avatars, and also being able to economically make sense of that of that new world.
So how do you think this will, play out in the African continent? Already we know some startups are looking at how to dabble in this new technological evolution.
Yeah, well, I think for Africa, right, it's important that we are part of the conversation. The continent, has one of the youngest population in the world, but I think it's beyond the vibrancy of a population, because if you look at our internet penetration, it's still quite low at 22%. If you look at our literacy level, we still sit at about 70%. Whereas the average literacy level is about 90%. So what it means is a lot of people are still not online. You have over 35% of people on the continent, living in poverty, right? So we still have a lot of infrastructural challenges to deal with, to figure out, to be able to even get to that point. If you also look at from a connection point of view, the metaverse would require, like the 5G type technology, but on the continent, we are still figuring out the 4G infrastructure,
right? So I believe we have a long way to go, but it holds an opportunity because it allows us to begin to see what is possible. And then the government and the private sector can also begin to look at how to begin to build infrastructures in that area. One is increasing literacy level to ensure that people begin to understand how that space works and begin to prepare for that future, because it's going to come. A couple of years ago, a lot of people didn't know that it was important for your brand to be online, but today it's become a critical skill set that is required in most big corporations. So the continent isn't ready yet, but it's an opportunity that we need to be very aware of and we need to monitor.
So how can people prepare themselves? Because, you said this reality is going to come. Something you said struck me, the physical, virtual, and augmented reality all coming together to become one. So we're in this conversation now. How can people literally prepare themselves?
Right. I think the literacy is very, very important. People need to begin to try to understand how that space works, try to figure out that space, and build skills that would allow them play in that environment. On a global level, you have brands who are already in that space, who are already leveraging metaverse to either promote their fashion products or to promote all kinds of products. We heard very recently how one of the CEOs of a global corporation actually evolved his company, to call his company a name that also draws from metaverse, and also saying he's going to evolve his company in 5 years. So I think it's about people being in the know, learning the basic knowledge and acquiring the basic skills and begin to explore, opportunities within that space. It's already happening. Don't get me wrong. There are people who are already selling NFTs, in that space. But I believe there's still needs to be a lot of awareness done in that space. But on the other hand, there are also infrastructural challenges that would also limit that. So it has to work hand in hand, really. But yes, it's definitely an opportunity that we should not overlook, and that holds huge potential for the future.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Emeka Obia, the lead strategy and planning at Leo Burnett. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And that's it on the program today and for the week. Thank you so much for always being a part of it. I'm Layo Adegoke.